All right, tax season, it's that time of year again. Forms, numbers, and for a lot of us, a whole bunch of questions. And one of the biggest head scratchers year after year is figuring out who exactly you can claim as a dependent. If you get it right, you could be looking at some really valuable tax breaks. But if you get it wrong, well, let's just focus on making sure you get it right. So you might be asking yourself, can I claim my kid who's away at college? Or what about my elderly parent I've been helping out? Or that cousin who stayed with me for most of the year? These are the real questions people have. Today, we're going to cut right through all that complexity and give you a super clear roadmap to find the answer. Okay, so the very first thing you need to get is that the IRS basically has two different ways, two paths to figure out if someone counts as your dependent. It's kind of like a fork in the road. Your potential dependent has to go down one of these paths, but they can't go down both. So what are these two paths? Well, they're called the qualifying child and the qualifying relative. Now, the qualifying child path, that one's got some pretty strict rules. But, and this is a big but, it can lead to some of the best tax credits out there. The qualifying relative path is a little more flexible, a bit broader. We're going to kick things off with the first one, because it's the one most people run into, the qualifying child. All right, let's dive right in. Now, here's the thing. To be your qualifying child for tax purposes, it's not enough for them to just be your child. Nope. They have to pass a very specific 5-part checklist. And I mean they have to pass every single test. There are no exceptions here, no partial credit. You can almost think of it like a 5-part obstacle course. They've got to clear every single hurdle. First, there's the relationship test, then the age test. After that, residency, then support, and if needed, there's a final tiebreaker. So let's break down exactly what it takes to get through each of these. First up, we've got the relationship test. And honestly, this one is pretty straightforward. The person has to be your child, your sibling, or a foster child placed with you. This also covers all these steps and halves, so stepchild, step-sibling, half-sibling. And it even goes down the family tree, including their descendants. That means your grandchild, your niece, or your nephew could all check this box. Okay, next up is the age test, and this is where you really have to pay attention to the details. The child has to be under age 19 by the end of the year. Or they can be under 24 if they were a full-time student for at least part of 5 months during the year. Now, there's a really important exception here. If the person is permanently and totally disabled, the age limit just goes away completely. Oh, and there's one last little rule. They have to be younger than you are. Test number 3 is residency. This one's pretty simple on the surface. The child has to have lived with you for more than half the year. We're talking more than 6 months under the same roof. But here's the good news. The IRS is reasonable about this. They have what they call temporary absences. So if your kid is away at college, or maybe in the hospital for a bit, or serving in the military, that time absolutely still counts as them living with you. All right, now for test number 4, support. And I really want you to listen closely to this one because this is where a lot of people get it mixed up. The rule is not that you had to provide more than half their support. The rule is that the child could not have provided more than half of their own support. See the difference? It's a huge distinction. The focus is on what they paid for. And a quick tip for students, scholarships don't count as support the student provided for themselves. That's a big one. Okay, so what about all the people who don't quite fit into those nice, neat, qualifying child boxes? Like an older child who's out of school, or maybe an elderly parent that you're helping to support. Well, for them, the IRS created that second path we talked about. So now, let's explore the rules for a qualifying relative. This path has its own checklist, this time with 4 tests. Now, some of these might sound a little familiar, but trust me, the details are critically different. And just like before, the person has to pass every single one of these tests to be claimed as your qualifying relative. It's all or nothing. The very first test is basically a gatekeeper. It's called the Not a Qualifying Child test. And it's simple. The person you're trying to claim cannot be your qualifying child. But that's not all. They also can't be the qualifying child of anybody else either. This path is basically the backup plan, reserved only for people who don't fit into that first category for anyone. Okay, on to the gross income test. And this one is a hard and fast rule. For the 2024 tax year, the person's gross income for the entire year has to be less than $5,050. There's no wiggle room. If they earned just $1 over that amount, they fail this test, and you can't claim them as a qualifying relative, period.
And here we are again at the support test. But listen up, because for a qualifying relative, the rule is completely flipped on its head. This time, the focus isn't on them, it's on you. To pass this test, you, the taxpayer, must have provided more than half of that person's total support for the year. We're talking about everything: food, rent, utilities, medical bills, you name it.
So let's just put this side by side because it's a fantastic illustration of the difference. For a qualifying child, the question is, did the child provide more than half of their own support? The focus is on them. For a qualifying relative, the question is, did you provide more than half of their support? The focus is on you. Nailing this one distinction is probably one of the biggest keys to getting all of this right.
Okay, so what happens in those tricky situations where a child actually meets all the qualifying child tests for more than one person? You see this all the time with divorced parents, for example, or maybe a child who lives with a parent and a grandparent. If two different people try to claim the same child, well, the IRS doesn't just flip a coin. They have a very specific, very strict set of rules to break the tie.
And this is exactly how that pecking order works. The rules are always going to favor a parent over someone who isn't a parent. If both people who could claim the child are parents, then it goes to the parent the child lived with for more nights during the year. If that's a tie, it goes to the parent with the higher adjusted gross income, or AGI. It's a rigid hierarchy, and it's designed so there's always one clear winner.
Whew, I know, we just went through a ton of rules and tests and checklists. So you might be thinking, why does all this tiny detail matter so much? Well, here's the payoff. Getting this right is literally the key that unlocks some of the biggest and best tax benefits you can get.
When you correctly claim a dependent, it can open up a whole new world of tax savings. For starters, you might be able to use a better filing status, like head of household, which has lower tax rates. Even bigger, it can make you eligible for huge tax credits, like the child tax credit, the credit for other dependents, or the really powerful earned income tax credit. And remember, credits are amazing because they aren't just deductions, they are dollar-for-dollar reductions of the tax you owe. We're talking about savings that can easily add up to thousands of dollars.
So there you have it. We've walked through the two main paths: qualifying child and qualifying relative. We've broken down all the specific tests you need to know for each one. We cleared up that confusing support test, and we laid out the tiebreaker rules for tricky situations. So now the question is for you. Take a second, think about your own family, your own situation. With everything you know now, who qualifies in your family?